Hello folks, this is Steve AV4L. Now you know that nothing in this episode is a promotion except of myself, nor a recommendation, patting myself on the back. You'll see. So here I am at slashdot.org, News for Nerds. I was scrolling down. Boring, 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 boring. Oh, there it is. The basic programming language turns 80. So this was published May 1st, 2024. So it must be 60 years ago on May 1st, 1964. At 4 a.m. in the morning, my kind of person, a quiet revolution in computing began at Dartmouth College. Where's Dartmouth? New Hampshire? My fourth year mathematics class in the high school was taught by somebody who got her degree in English at Dartmouth. Did you hear what I just said? Because the last quarter of my senior year, she was doing an introduction to calculus. A quiet revolution in computing began at Dartmouth College. That's when mathematicians John Kameny and Thomas Kurtz successfully ran the first program written in their newly developed BASIC, all capital letters, beginner's all-purpose symbolic instruction code, BASIC, programming language at the college's General Electric GE225 mainframe. Now that part's the surprise to me. You know, basically when you think of mainframes, you think of IBM. But I worked at one time, when I lived in the Philadelphia area, for Honeywell. And they kind of had a mainframe. But you never heard of it, right? You know, we all know about the original Ford Model Ts, but you know there were a few hundred at least other brands of cars way, way back at the beginning. What happened to them? Does anybody use BASIC anymore? Getting back to this. Now, my mind's wandering. Red Hat, Command Line Heroes, mainframes, the GE225. I've never looked at this. Oh, look at this. Mainframes, the GE225, and the birth of BASIC. The computing industry started booming after World War II. General Electric CEO refused to enter the market, but a small team of rebel employees, I didn't know this. This is from Red Hat, you know, Linux. When I lived in Raleigh, the last place, every day I used to drive by one of the founders of Red Hat Software, little mansion there on Overland Road. General Electric CEO refused to enter that market, but a small team of rebel employees bent the rules to forge on in secret. They created the GE 225. It was a giant leap in engineering that pushed computing from a niche market to the mainstream, sowing the seeds for today's tech industry. I never heard of this. I'll admit the only thing I know about mainframes is IBM 360. When I lived in the Philadelphia area, I took a night course at Temple University, an introduction to System 360. If I had followed that path instead of the crap I did, I probably would have ended up as a multi-billionaire, or at least retired rich. Before the creation of general-purpose mainframes, computers were often built to perform a single function. Can we think of one? What did the Brits do? They built a computer to decode Enigma Nazi encoded messages. Special built computer. William Ocasio recalls how GE's first specialized computers, the IRMA, helped banks process thousands of transactions per day. A few key GE employees hoodwinked their CEO into creating a computing department. See, GE was known for like transformers and electric light bulbs. So somebody explains how this resulted in the revolutionary machine, the GE 225, and how engineers at Dartmouth College adapted the GE 225 for time sharing and used it to create basic, major milestones in making computers more accessible. All right, I didn't realize that when I did that I would get this sort of background. Okay? Now, what's that got to do with me? Well, when was the first time I used BASIC? Now, they say that it was invented in 1964, and it was on a mainframe. First time I used BASIC was in 1983. And it was on a computer running the OS 9 operating system. Wikipedia. OS-9. OS-9 is a family of real-time processor-based multitasking, multi-user operating systems developed in the 1980s. When did I say I programmed in 6809 assembler and BASIC on what you would call a personal computer, a PC, not a mainframe. I was using a mainframe, but that was from something else. On an actual, starting in 1983. OS-9 is a family of real-time process-based multitasking, multi-user. That was a big breakthrough. Instead of one machine, one person sitting there in front of it, you had terminals wired in different rooms coming back to the computer sitting there, and they all could be working at the same time, doing things like word processing and spreadsheets. Does Microsoft still push spreadsheets these days? What's that called? Excel? So developed in the 1980s, originally by Microware Systems Corporation for the Motorola 6809 microprocessor, which I programmed in assembly language and BASIC. Didn't know anything about C yet. C programming language. It was purchased by The OS9 family was popular for general purpose computing and remains in use in commercial embedded systems and amongst hobbyists. Today, OS9 is a product name used for both the Motorola 68000 series, Tandy, Radio Shack. They adopted that when it went to the 68000. What's the 68000? That's the next generation after the 6809. Just like Intel had a series of microprocessors. Today, OS9, it's amazing. They're claiming that it's still running. OS9 is a product name used by Motorola 68000 series machine language OS and a portable version written in C, originally known as OS 9000. I don't think I ever used that. And they're saying that OS 9, level 1, dates back to 1979 and 1980. When did I did programming under that system? 1983. Close to the beginning. It was written in assembly language for the 6809 CPU, and all of its processors ran on a 64,000 byte, 64 kilobit. Do you understand that? We're not even talking about a megabyte. We're talking about a lot less than a megabyte. We're talking about less than 10% of a megabyte. We're talking about less than 1/20th of a megabyte. And my machines have terabytes hard drives. It was written in assembly language for the Motorola 6809 CPU, and all of its processes ran within the 64 kilobyte address space of the CPU without a memory management unit. It was developed as a supporting operating system for the Basic 09 project. See, we wound back to, and that's why I was able to program also using the BASIC program on that system. I helped the department that I was in revamp how they were publishing a genetics yearly set of research reports. I wrote the program that sorted all of the references in the index at the back in alphabetical order. I wrote that in BASIC. And why would we even bother to do that? Because the number of the yearly newsletter for that plant got so big that instead of there just being maybe a dozen contributors, now there were like 200 and 300 people wanting to submit multiple articles. So how do you keep up with that? Oh, there's new technology. It's called a computer. No, not the mainframe. We have it right here on the desk. 1983. And what was happening in 84 and 5? Oh, that was the beginning of the people in the blue suits from IBM coming around, pushing the very first IBM PCs. And what was the other operating system that was competitive? It was called CP/M. Look it up. But that ran on a Z80, and I saw an article about the Z80 this week. The people who have been making Z80 processors, which is like a 8-bit, I don't know if it's a 4-bit or 8-bit processor from way back then, they finally stopped manufacturing them this month. they're used in embedded systems also because they're cheap and they're easy to program. And there's tons of code. Wait a minute, my mind's straight. It was developed, OS 9 was developed as a supporting operating system for the Basic 09 project, contracted for by Motorola as part of the 6809 development. You have to have more than just a processor, you have to have a whole bunch of things that are useful. Otherwise, why would people try to design things that would make you sell 1 million CPUs? I mean, that's what Microsoft did, and that's what Intel did, and that's what... A later 6809 version, level 2, takes advantage of memory mapping hardware, supported up to, ta-da, all of 2 megabytes of memory, and that was finally around 1980. In most implementations, included a GUI on some platforms. Yes, there was a GUI on ours for the spreadsheet. It was primitive. In 1983, OS 9/6809 was ported to the 68,000. Okay, so this is about OS 9. And they go into a lot of detail. In comparisons with Unix, which was starting to spread out of Bell Labs and being, within a couple of years, put on what we now call PCs, competing with the IBM PC, DOS, competing with the IBM PC DOS. OS 9 has faded from popular use, but the company that owns it now does still support it, and it does run on modern architectures such as ARM and x86. In other words, I could get a copy of it that is coded for the CPU on the computer that I'm recording this with, and I might see if I can download that and just play with it. Nostalgia. Versions of OS 9 68K ran on a variety of platforms: the Sharp in Japan, Color Computer, PEP, Delmar, Atari, Apple Macintoshes, Amiga, TRS-80 Color Computer and clones. That's Radio Shack. Is Radio Shack around now? Now, I'm going to look for something. OS 9/6809 ran on Motorola Exabus systems using the Motorola 6809, the SS50 bus, correct, not the SS100, SS50, correct, from companies such as, and now it mentions a series of them, and the one we're interested in is this link, SWTPC, Southwest Technical Products Company. And now you're going to see a picture of the computer I did my first personal computing on. Southwest Technical Products Corporation, SWTPC, was an American producer of electronic kits. You had to build it. You had to build it. And later, complete computer systems. It was incorporated in 1967 in San Antonio, Texas, and then in 1990 it became Points of Does it have any more pictures? When microprocessors, CPU chips became available, SWTPC became one of the first suppliers of microcomputers to the general public. focusing on designs using the Motorola 6800 and later the 6809, which is what I programmed on. The first such microcomputer introduced by the company in November 1975 was for the 6800 micro, and it also used the SS50 bus. That company also supplies computer terminals. Remember what I said? You can have the terminals in different rooms and the cabling running back to the back of the computer. Multi-user multitasking in 68K of memory. And that is the way it looked inside. Do you notice you see the cards are vertical. The CPU is back here on this card. This is a EEPROM. Heatsink. I gotta take that back. This is the main board. That's the 6809. This is the crystal that set the frequency that ran this and ran the bus. All right? And can you see the pins here? Those are known as Molex pins. So in order to plug the board in, they're not like they are now. Look at how many pins there were. Here's a big electrolytic capacitor. There's the power transformer. These are the rectifiers down here. There's another kind of Molex plug-in. Molex is the name of a company that made connectors of various kinds, an early pioneer in it. I assume they're still in business. And then you could get peripheral cards here. You might be able to... Did I ever build a card and actually design one and plug it in? Yes, and I still have it somewhere in a junk box. All the way back from 1985. Now this was a 6800. This was the earliest version. The one I used looked just like this, but it was the 6809 Motorola processor. I'm just reminiscing. It all started with this. The basic programming language turned 60. I'm telling you the basic circumstances in which I programmed my first basic. I taught myself from the manual how to program in BASIC, and I turned it to practical use in helping to turn out a genetics annual newsletter. Because so many people were contributing, it was outrunning the usual way of just hand typing and mimeographing it. We needed to do it in a more modern way. Well, how long ago was that? If that was 1983, 40 years ago. Just having fun, folks. Steve A. before you. Just having fun. Saying see you in 73.